Hi everyone, my name is Glenn Bartley and I'm here today in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia with the brand new Canon 1DX Mark III. I thought I'd get my hands on one of these babies and put it through the paces a little bit and give you guys a true bird photographer's perspective on this camera. So over the next few days I'm going to be shooting in a variety of situations and trying to see what really are the strengths and weaknesses of this camera, and also try to give you my perspective on whether you guys should buy it depending on the types of things you shoot. So I'm going to test it out. I'm going to go try to do some flight shooting, some low light shooting, photograph some ducks, maybe some hummingbirds. We'll see what we can get and we'll report back with the results. Thanks for watching. Alright, so one of the reasons why you might consider buying a top-of-the-line camera like this 1DX Mark III, it has to be for the autofocus capabilities. Obviously that's one of the top features that people are looking for. So I came out this morning to try to test some autofocus capabilities. I was hoping some more ducks would be flying around, but almost nothing was flying around until a bald eagle flew out from those trees behind me and started frantically chasing after these ducks. It's brightened up a lot since then. It was very dark, flat light. That is an extremely challenging situation for autofocus. So that was a perfect test. And I would say that the camera did really well. I was using the single point with the assist points, and once I got it focused on the bird, it held it extremely well while he was banking around, even against a very challenging backdrop like that. So in this situation, I'm going to give the 1DX thumbs up. I would say this is the best camera I've ever used as far as autofocus tracking capability. And what's also, of course, amazing for action, and again, one of those features that you'd pay that money for this camera, is the frame rate. 16 frames a second. So when you do get that focus and something happens, you're going to have a lot of frames to choose from. So overall, pretty impressed with the autofocus performance here this morning. Alright, so yesterday we talked about one of the reasons why you might be interested in buying a camera such as the 1DX Mark III, which was the autofocus performance. Today I'm out in the much darker Pacific rainforest, and we're going to talk about another reason why you might be interested, which is the ISO performance. For bird photographers, we're always hungry for shutter speed, and the only way often to get that is to raise your ISO. Of course, when you do that, you get a lot of noise. So cameras like this have a much better noise performance, or at least in theory they do. I've got a Pacific Wren singing behind me here, and I'm going to try to get some shots at a variety of ISOs, 6400, 12800, maybe even 25600, and we can compare the results and see if this camera really does deliver on ISO performance. Alright, so we've talked about two reasons why you might invest in such a professional camera like this, which was, the best possible autofocus capabilities and also really good high ISO, low noise capabilities. When you're shooting in the dark forest and you don't want to have all that noise, these top-of-the-line cameras are going to be your best bet. But a third reason why somebody might choose to spend all that money on a camera like this is the build quality. So a camera like this, the 1 Series cameras have always been very robust, built with more hardcore elements, weather sealed, able to withstand, even if you're a sports photographer shooting a NFL football game standing in the rain, these cameras are still going to hold up. Whereas with something like a 5D or a 7D, of course they're weather sealed still, but not as much. So the build quality is certainly one more aspect of why professional photographers, photojournalists, sports photographers would potentially buy this. And the final thing I wanted to point out is they have made one kind of interesting ergonomic change to this camera over, for example, the 1DX Mark II. They've added a new little thing. It's back here on the AF on button, and what it is basically it's like a touch screen almost on that button. So as you move your thumb around, it actually automatically moves the focus point around. Now, I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those things where you either love it or you hate it, or perhaps you get used to it. It's pretty cool that you can move your focus point around, but to be honest, when I was shooting yesterday morning and it was kind of cold out, and I was switching back and forth between I often use both of these buttons as autofocus, one being servo and one being one shot, and I found when I moved back over, it would inadvertently move my focus point without me really wanting to, so I actually found it kind of annoying and disabled it. It's very likely that if I shot with this camera for months on end, I'd get very used to it and it would be great. I don't know. I only had the camera for a week, so I can't say, but it is a cool new feature that some people might love. I thought I would also just point out, since we're now here in a quiet environment, the other thing, we talked about it a little bit with the autofocus, but it's just the frame rate of this camera. If you're doing action photography and you get this, ridiculous frame rate, 16 frames a second, and it does not buffer. This camera, basically, you could take 100 or 200 pictures and it will not buffer out. So, I mean, realistically, how often do you do that? Very, very, very rarely. But sometimes I have encountered, for sure, with my 7D where something amazing is happening and I'm blasting off frames, and eventually you buffer out and something's happening in front of you and you miss it. And that's the kind of thing that a professional, imagine photojournalists, some amazing moment is happening and they're shooting and shooting and shooting and their camera buffers out. That once in a lifetime moment is lost. This camera, you won't lose it. Now, whether that matters for a bird photographer, probably not. But I'm just pointing out some of the features, some of the reasons why you might want to buy this camera or you might not. Anyways, we'll go back inside and we'll tally everything up, and I'll give you my final thoughts on this in just a moment. All right, well, the time has come to do some conclusions, I think, on this new Canon 1DX Mark III. I've had the camera for a few days, done some shooting in what I think would be the most interesting things for bird photographers to think about. First thing we looked at was the autofocus performance. We took the camera down and tried some flight shooting, and we had actually a really good test because we had challenging conditions, flat light with a dark bird on a dark background in quite dim flat light. And I would say the camera handled really well. It tracked well. Once it grabbed, it really held on quite well, better than any camera that I've used. And then you have that amazing 16 frames a second for really some great action shots. So that was great on those eagles. Second thing I think for me, what I'm always looking for something better in a camera is ISO performance. And certainly, I was actually just downstairs in my office processing up some of those Pacific Ren shots, and I went straight to the highest ISO that I shot at, 25,600. And of course, there's noise. There's no question. There's noise. But honestly, once you process it, and then I used this amazing new software, TOPAZ Denoise AI, on it, and to be honest, it looked pretty good for 25,000. So I wasn't able to, of course, do a test like comparing specific controlled test results of the 1DX Mark II versus the 1DX Mark III or anything like that. But definitely overall the noise performance of this new camera is quite good. I will include down below or somewhere some links to those comparable raw files of those Rens, and that way you guys can look and compare for yourself and see what you think. Otherwise, new features on the camera. You still got the great 1 series build quality. You've got probably the most notable for me new feature was that little on the back button where it's like a touchpad and you move your thumb around and it moves the focus point around. It's probably one of those features that you either love it or you hate it or you get used to it. I found that I didn't really like using it that much. But then again, I had limited time with the camera. Unfortunately, this camera came to me from B&H Photo Video. So nice of them to send it for me to check it out. Unfortunately, it came one day after I left for a photo tour to Ecuador. That would have been awesome to have had it for like 3 weeks in a more challenging shooting environments, and to test it out in sort of really what I like to shoot in. Didn't happen. Anyways, I did the best I could with the time I had with the camera. So the question is, should you buy this camera? And the answer is, of course, it depends. It's a very expensive camera. It's a top-of-the-line camera. I think if you're coming from the 1DX Mark II, if that's your current primary body, then you've got to really want to be on the cutting edge and have the best camera out there to want to buy this camera. Of course, the 1DX2 was a great camera and has many of the same features. So I think you're going to see, some improvements, but incremental improvements for sure. If you had if you were shooting with a 5D and you thought you wanted to upgrade to a 1 series body, of course with this you're going to have that, better autofocus, faster frame rate, better weather sealed body, and a host of other new features. So that would be more of a personal decision whether you think that's worth the money to you. And of course, if you're shooting with, like me, if you're mostly a field photographer and you are shooting birds in the field where you're not in a controlled situation, in a blind, or you're not necessarily able to attract the birds as close as you would want, then I've never been that interested in a full frame body, to be honest. And to be totally honest, nothing's changed. Even though it's an amazing camera, I'd love to have one for certain applications, I have to make real world decisions with my money and what can even go in my camera bag. And there's my cat. I just can't justify the cost of a camera like this. So it really depends on what you shoot and how you shoot as to whether a full frame body is interesting, and then if you definitely want a full frame body, you've got to make decisions with your finances based on what you want to do. So I think I'll just end this review with, well, what do I hope we are going to see from Canon? What's coming next? We all know we're going towards mirrorless, and in fact the 1DX Mark III shows a lot of those mirrorless capabilities that could be coming. So when you do switch to live view, you see really advanced tracking capabilities, face tracking, things like that. You see 20 frames a second. So that's a glimpse. It's telling you, look, mirrorless is coming, and there's some amazing things about mirrorless that Canon and other companies could unveil. Probably for me, what I would love to see, what I hope happens, I'd be so excited if Canon put out a camera that would say something like a full frame camera that was something like 50 megapixels. We all know that's definitely doable. And but what I want to see is a crop mode. If I'm looking through an electric viewfinder, I want to see a crop mode where I can use the camera in full frame. Maybe you can customize that even and say, look, I'm going to make one of them 1.0, one of them 1.5, and one of them 1.8 or 2 or whatever, so that you could simply hit a button and zoom in on your target. And you would then, of course, have less megapixels. So if you were in 2x crop mode, you'd only have 25 megapixels. That would be incredible for bird photographers. When you're in the field, you're shooting some little warbler up in a tree, 2x crop mode, boom, he's bigger in your viewfinder. You can put that focus point right on the eye. That'd be awesome. So I really hope we see that coming in the mirrorless cameras that are to come in the future. But in the meantime, we've got this 1DX Mark III. It's a phenomenal camera. It's probably the best DSLR ever made. I don't want to get into brand stuff, but certainly the best DSLR that Canon's ever made. It's a great camera. It was a pleasure to use, and if it suits the style of shooting that you do, and you've got the resources, lucky for you, go get one. And make sure you get it at B&H Photo Video. They are a great company to deal with, and they were really they were really nice to let me have this camera to test out. So I hope you found some information here useful, and thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.